All right, we're here, the MMA Casual, and we got somewhat of a little studio going on here. And I do apologize because I had a whole video set up. I'm having some technical difficulties. I wanted to get as much content as I could out about UFC 290. I didn't want to wait another day, but I got this whole setup coming to you. It's gonna be good this Saturday. I'll have it all settled, but let's get right to it. UFC 290, absolute madness. Um, I'm gonna start off with Robbie Lawler. What a career! It's easy to say, most of his fan base comes from the early 2000s. They've been watching him since Strike Force, and one of the things about Robbie Lawler that I find impressive is that he goes into every fight ready for war, right? He's always been the brawler, and to go into your retirement fight, to actually announce it, which most fighters don't, and to finish the fight in the first round, 38 seconds. I wasn't too happy that they put him to finalize the prelims. I think he could have easily replaced the Jalen Turner Dan Hooker fight. Just give him that courtesy, let him be on the main card. At the end of the day, he is Robbie Lawler, a UFC legend. He just got inducted in the Hall of Fame. It's his last fight. He's retiring. I think you got to give him the main card, but the UFC decided not to. But Robbie Lawler went out in style, and I think it's the way he would have wanted to go out, or anybody wants to go out. 38 seconds knockout. It was just beautiful against Nico Price, and I just think he deserves quite the congratulations and the bow. I think he was represented very well. I think the UFC did a lot for him. I love the fact that they made that little clip for him, and we're going into a phase now where we're seeing a lot of these legends and original fighters, ones that a lot of us grew up watching. They're retiring, they're getting old, and one of the things I always appreciate about Robbie Lawler is the fact that he was brought up in an era where you actually had guys specializing in their craft. And what I mean by that is you guys had people coming in who only knew Brazilian jiu-jitsu or only knew how to wrestle or would come in and only brawl, and he was successful then. And then he goes into an era where mixed martial arts comes around and really takes it by storm, where we start seeing guys like John Jones that decide to walk into a gym, learn mixed martial arts, know a little bit about everything, and become successful. So the fact that he's been successful all this time, and I know his record doesn't scream it. He walked into this fight, I believe it was 29-16, and I think he ends his career 30-16. I think you got to give him that credit because he was able to not only be successful in the beginning of the UFC days and Strikeforce, but he was able to continue that into a league of full mixed martial artists and still be successful. So, Robbie Lawler, we all got to tip our hats off to him. A lot of respect for him, and I just love the way it all panned out for him. Gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, and then the next day he just gets a beautiful W, and it's all on International Fight Week. And I think it's the way anyone would want to go out. Conor McGregor tweeted something about him coming back. It wouldn't take long for him to come back, and I just think that Robbie Lawler is over the game. He's expressed time and time again that his body can no longer take it, that he didn't feel good in training. His training camps were rough. He would wake up not feeling good. His footwork didn't feel good, and he said, luckily on that night it was just my night, and I feel good, and he felt good throughout the fight. So that's all we have for him, and I think he's done. He's said and done. He's not like McGregor gonna come back for attention or anything. And yeah, I think Robbie Lawler did everything he needed to do in his career. So moving on, the main card, UFC 290. I have to say I really do believe this is gonna be the fight of the card of the year. When I first saw the card for International Fight Week, I wouldn't say there wasn't a lot of star power, but I just thought the UFC could produce more. There's a lot of interesting divisions. There's a lot of big fights to make. And I feel like some of these fights would have happened anyways. And we did see some star power, but either way, everyone delivered. And we're going to start off with Bo Nickel facing off Val Woodburn, which I'll be transparent with you guys. I had no idea who that kid was going into this fight. And I don't know if he was 5'7", 5'8". I know Bo Nickel had a 2-inch reach advantage. Val came in 7-0. Bo Nickel came in 4-0. And he's the prodigy. He's the next and upcoming thing. And we know him for his wrestling. And that's what I expected to see. I saw the size of Val Woodburn and I got a little concerned. I said, hey, if this guy lays a punch, it looks like he could do damage. And surprising enough, another 38-second stoppage. Bo Nickel comes out and he says, "Hey, I am a D1 wrestler. I am a world class wrestler, but I have hands." And I think he really proved that to all of us. Yes, the competition wasn't anything impressive. I'm not going to take this win and all of a sudden say this guy deserves a title shot. But I am going to say that he proved that he could throw hands. He has power in his hands because at the end of the day, he did finish the fight. Val Woodburn didn't know where he was. He got clipped. He got clipped by, I believe it was a right hook that you see him kind of stiffen up, and he just kind of wiggles in the air. He didn't look good, and yeah, it was a free fight for him, so I congratulate him. He got to meet Donald Trump and impress him. A minute in, he was able to finish that fight, and the chronicles of Bo Nickel continue. I really want to see him against someone who could wrestle. I know he was a little disappointed with that last second pullout from his opponent, but I think the UFC is gonna have to test him soon. I know he's only 5-0 professionally, and I think there's still a lot to see. At the end of the day, he started off when he was in Dana White's Contender Series. It's not enough to say anything, especially in that division that's very heavy and has some world class athletes. But he did what he needed to do. I mean, 38 seconds. You can't ask for more from Bo Nickel. So we move on. Jalen Turner and Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker, ever since he fought Dustin Poirier, has not been the same fighter. Me and my best friend were talking about it, and I think it's safe to say that he's a couple losses away, if not one loss away, from hopping into the prelims and staying there. I know he's had some tough competition, but he just hasn't been the Dan Hooker we saw about 5 years ago. So going into this fight, his last fight was Claudio Puyo. Or Puyo, I don't remember his last name. Not impressed with that kid. That was a bust. That was the same card that Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira fought for the first time in mixed martial arts. He got the job done, but we knew Jalen Turner was going to be a test. At the end of the day, Jalen Turner is an absolute giant in his weight class. There's no reason for that man to be fighting at 155, and he did miss weight. But I really did not expect him to perform the way he did. I don't know if he has a new coaching staff, if I don't know if the hair dye got to him, but he really performed. He did a great job of capitalizing when he needed to. He took some heavy shots from Jalen Turner. There was a kick to the head in that second round that I really just thought he was gonna just drop dead. It was perfect contact, and I believe that's the kick that probably broke his orbital bone. And I really think that Jalen Turner, the weight cut was too much for him, because if you're watching the fight, I did have Jalen Turner win round one. Round two, I had him winning up to the end of the round when he got dropped. And ultimately, I just think his cardio gave out, and Dan Hooker was able to capitalize and keep his pace. And, Dan Hooker takes round two and three, and it's all said and done after that. After the fight, I believe they both went to the hospital. They got some diagnostic testing done, and it's pretty cool to see that Dan Hooker fractured his orbital bone, and he also fractured a bone in his arm. So the guy's tough. I got to give it to him. I did doubt him going into this fight, but I think he proved himself. And I'm not gonna say he's still a top contender, but he's definitely here to stay, and he's definitely gonna compete in the lightweight division, and he's gonna give entertaining fights. As soon as I saw that fight, I said, "Hey, this might be the fight of the night." Like, if we don't have any fight better than this, you got to give it to them. Those guys went out there and they gave it all they had, and I think you got to respect it. Moving on, the biggest heartbreak of the night, UFC 290 was a night of mixed emotions, a card of mixed emotions, and for most UFC fans who appreciate grown men, fighters with class, and just all around technicians, you gotta love Robert Whitaker. And to see Dricus Duplessis, which also proved me wrong, because I'm not a fan of Dricus. I have not been impressed with his performances. I'm not gonna say they were lackluster, but I just don't really think I see Dricus obtaining the belt, let alone getting a title shot. So the fact that he went in there and he takes out Robert Whitaker, which in my eyes would be champion if Israel Adesanya did not exist, right? We have those guys that have their kryptonite. It's safe to say that Robert Whitaker's kryptonite is Israel Adesanya. And if he beat Dricus, he would have gotten a third shot at Israel, and obviously his last. But now that he lost to Dricus, I just don't think Robert Whitaker gets another shot unless Israel Adesanya retires. And it's unfortunate because he gets to a point where where he's just beating the top contenders. He takes a loss when he's fighting for the title, or in a match like this, which is a title eliminator. So, moving forward, Dricus du Plessis, he did a good job. I think he's really unorthodox, and not so much what he's throwing, but like his stance, his movement. It's almost like he's a really awkward fighter, and I think it's almost like he's bland, but. He caught Robert Whitaker, and to say you finished Robert Whitaker, for me to say that he doesn't deserve a title shot is absolutely ridiculous. So power to him. He proved me wrong. I think he proved a lot of people wrong, and I think that the fact that he beat Robert Whitaker is what really hurts, because Robert Whitaker is just such a likable guy. I think that's what everyone's kind of disappointed about. But I got to give it to Dricus du Plessis. When you go in there and you finish someone like Robert Whitaker, you gain everyone's respect. So I'm very curious to see how that fight with Israel Adesanya goes. I don't think he stands even close of a chance. But we were able to see an interesting promo there at the end. So Israel Adesanya gets called into the octagon, and this is about the fourth or fifth time we see this year. Sean O'Malley went in there to face off against Sterling. We've had a couple. I'm drawing a blank right now, but they call Israel Adesanya. He was cage side, just like many celebrities and fighters, and he didn't necessarily display any class, to say the least, right? Israel Adesanya, not too long ago, Dricus du Plessis, better said, told made a mention of Adesanya not really being African, right? And obviously not that he's not native to the country, but the fact that he doesn't reside there anymore, that he's repping New Zealand, and he's everywhere, and he claims he's African, but he's never there. And Dricus du Plessis from South Africa, and he actually lives there, so he's the real African. So I think that set Israel Adesanya off, and there's almost seemed like an insecurity almost. So Israel Adesanya goes up there, takes the attention away from Dricus. They even had the mic on him, and he would speak over Dricus du Plessis, and ultimately he dropped a very insane rap album. He dropped the N word like 20 times, and he just kept repeating it and repeating it. And it was almost like he was waiting for Dricus to say it back to him. And it's like, number one, Dricus wasn't gonna drop that, and number two, I feel like Dricus took the high road. He just stayed silent, just stared at him, and it was almost like, hey, you're gonna act like a child, and you're gonna be here and not represent yourself well and like a gentleman and not have class. That's up to you. So I think Dricus definitely took the high road. I just didn't like that Israel Adesanya took the attention away from him, because Dricus deserved the attention for beating Robert Whitaker. So we'll see what that fight entails. To be honest with you, I think it's a pretty easy win for Israel Adesanya. He's the second best middleweight of all time, and he's just worlds ahead right now. But you know what? Fighting is fighting, and I would have never thought Dricus would beat Robert Whitaker. So we'll see when that fight comes along. Moving on to the co-main event, another great fight. Honestly, we had the flyweight champion and the top contender go at it. Brandon Moreno, one of Mexico's favorites, and Alexander Pantoja. Which now, funny enough, Alexander Pantoja, I love that he came out to many men, and they censored it all, and it was super clean. But then when Israel Adesanya's in there dropping his new rap song, the N word, nothing censored, and he's just dropping it all the time. But we had to listen to Many Men, the censored version. But I do want to say that Alexander Pantoja, for the last couple of weeks and coming into this fight, was so serious. He seemed so determined. There was nothing that was going to stop this guy from being focused, and he just looked like he was ready to go in there and kill someone. And even though he won in split decision, I do want to say I think he beat Brandon Moreno fair and square. There was some initial comments I started seeing on my page and when I was live streaming, talking about the fight, that some people were like, "Oh, do you feel it was a robbery?" And I said, "No, not at all. I really do think it was 3-2. I'm surprised it was a split decision. I think that should have been unanimous." And that brings me to the point of judges are still very inconsistent in the UFC, and I think it's something they're going to have to tackle, because there's no reason that two judges have a fight 3 rounds to 2, and then another judge, it was 49-46 going the opposite way. It just doesn't really add up. And this fight, I could see how it could be a little closer. I could see if someone gave Brandon Moreno 3 rounds and Pantoja 2. But to give Brandon Moreno 4 rounds and Pantoja 1, it just didn't really make sense. And I don't know if the Mexican environment had anything to do with it, but the UFC has to get a hold of what's going on. We saw something very similar in the Marlon Vera versus Sanhagen fight. You can't have multiple judges or even one judge score the fight 50-45 or even 49-46 for one guy, and the opponent is on the other side with a 49-46. So it's a complete flip of scoring. And unless a fight is extremely close every round, where after each round you don't know who took that round, I don't think that should ever happen. And a fight like the Marlon Vera and Sanhagen fight wasn't that at all. And I don't believe the Moreno Pantoja fight was like that at all. I think there was maybe two rounds that were pretty hard to judge. The rest were clear in one direction. So I think the UFC needs to get a hold of the judging. But other than that, I think Pantoja is a very well-deserving champ. It's the third time he beats Brandon Moreno. I can't see Dana White throwing Brandon Moreno there against him again. I mean, another fourth fight in the flyweight division. Like, you guys have proven enough that there's not a lot of competition in the flyweight division. So I think they're going to have another contender step in, and hopefully Brandon Moreno takes out another few top contenders and maybe works his way back up. But I don't think we could justify a rematch as of now. Moving on to, of course, the main event of UFC 290. Alexander Volkanovski taking on Yair Rodriguez. So I just want to say that it's almost safe to say that Alexander Volkanovski is the best featherweight of all time. The only reason I doubt that statement is because I think there's a little bit of a recency bias, because you got to give it to Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo was dominant and a champion for a decade, and he did take out some serious competition. I would like to say that Volkanovski has taken out bigger names, even took out Aldo, Mendez. He's taken out Holloway. But I just think in the fashion that he does so, I just think that there is no hole in Alexander Volkanovski's game. And when you call him the number one pound for pound fighter in the world, I think there's no doubt. And I think that's why he might be the best featherweight of all time. And when it's all said and done, he might be one of the best of all time. He's up there. So you got to give him credit. I know he mentioned he's going to have to get a surgery after this fight. But every time that man steps into the octagon, not only does he give it his all, but he shows a perfect performance almost. There are very little holes in Volkanovski's game, if any, and he proved it against Yair Rodriguez. Yair Rodriguez coming into this fight was very scary. Yair Rodriguez is someone who has been in the game for a while. He's taken out some serious names. His resume is absolutely ridiculous, and he's extremely unorthodox. He pulls out these kicks, and if you rewatch the fight, just the snap on his kicks are so scary. It really just takes one to put somebody out, and I think Volkanovski respected him a lot, especially with the size difference. Yair Rodriguez looked a lot bigger than Volkanovski. I believe he's 5'11", and for the featherweight division, that's massive. And he has some really long legs, and he really displayed some great kicks and great striking. However, he was no match for Volkanovski, and again, Volkanovski proves that he's the best. And every time there's a doubt, just like those Max Holloway fights that some individuals think it went the other day, he comes back and proves you wrong. I think Volkanovski has had a few issues with the critics as far as being able to finish a fight. And I'd agree with that. He has a lot of decision wins, but he just went in there and you threw your best at him and he took him out before the third round was over. And it was in a very dominating fashion. He broke him down. He threw the same combination back to back. He found the hole in Yair's game. He threw a hell of a right hook, shook him up, got him up against the cage, got a double leg takedown, and just went to town. And Herb Dean, even though he wanted to watch, Yair get out of that position, he couldn't. And it was all said and done. It wasn't an early stoppage. It wasn't anything. He took control of that fight. He dominated him, and he proved that he's the number one pound for pound fighter. So moving forward, I do have to say that I'm really excited. We have a new up-and-comer, very talented, 26 years old, Spaniard, Ilia Topuria. That kid is an issue. When I saw him fight Josh Emmett, number one, Josh Emmett's a monster for just taking the beating he did. But Ilia Topuria he is so good. He is such a technical boxer. The way he moves in and out, his combinations, he's so precise, his slips, everything is so good. So to see him go up against potentially the best featherweight of all time and how good he is, it's just going to be a really fun, striking match, and I really do think if that happens this year, it's going to be the fight of the year, because I think those guys are going to go at it and they're going to hurt each other. And I could see how Volkanovski will end up grappling rather than striking with him, because that's how good Topuria is, and he's so young. So I'm very, very interested to see that fight and what's to come. So, guys, UFC 290 in a nutshell. I'm gonna start doing this more often. Do me a favor, subscribe. Be sure to share. The studio is gonna be ready soon enough. On Saturday, I'm live streaming. So just share, subscribe. Go follow my Instagram. Go follow my TikTok. I got some good stuff coming around. And yeah, some announcements coming your way on YouTube as well. Thanks for listening.